Okay, starting out today's webinar, I want to make sure that everyone is kind of settled in, have their coffee with them before we begin this in earnest. So let's wait 1 or 2 minutes just to make sure everybody can get settled in, get a cup of water, get a cup of coffee. I got myself a little bottle of water here. I think the virtual background is hiding it, but there's a water bottle here, which I always take for these meetings. A learning from my first webinar here, which I did not have water for and basically lost my voice about a quarter way through. Not cool, not cool. Barbara, how are things looking? Where are you in the world, by the way, Barbara?
Hi, yeah, I'm located in California, in Menlo Park, California, at Meta's headquarters. Nice to see you.
Amazing. Amazing. Likewise. Very excited to have you, Barbara. And as soon as everybody is joining, I'll let them know about the little change we're going to have today. We will expect it to have both Sebastian Keister from Audi and Barbara from Meta. But unfortunately, Sebastian at the very last moment couldn't join us for personal reasons. And while we would really like to have him in the future, for now, we need to make sure that we have to make a little bit of a change for this panel. Instead of the normal back and forth Q&A panel type situation that we have in these sessions, we're going to do more of a fireside chat. So basically, it will be me and Barbara and I talking a little bit about what Barbara does over at Meta, her specific organization and her role inside of it, and then try and tailor that back into the questions that we prepared in advance, but focusing more on the inner loop side of things, on the developer productivity side of things, and less on the production and live infra side of things. So apologies for this last minute change, but I'm positive this is going to be a very, very interesting fireside chat. Anyways, we are going to make it a little bit shorter just to be mindful of time. So instead of the normal 50-ish minutes of panel that we have, I think we'll do about 25-30 minutes of a panel of a kind of a fireside chat, and then we'll let you all guys you all go back to your routines, give you back 30 minutes of your day, which is always nice. I always like it when people give me back time. I always feel like I'm missing it, right, Barbara?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it looks like we're about 2 or 3 minutes after the hour. I want to mention again to the people joining us, and I think we'll start in a moment, that this panel, this masterclass, is going to be a little bit different. Instead of the normal back and forth panel situation that we usually have, because of a last minute change with Sebastian, who unfortunately could not make it today, we'll be doing a more of a fireside chat instead of a panel with the lovely Barbara, who has agreed to join us today. And to clarify, the original title topic kind of agenda that we were about was about doing a masterclass in production environment disasters. We planned on having kind of the two sides of the coin. So Sebastian, who's more of a production guy, will come in and explain how to mitigate the production side of things. And Barbara, as a person more in the inner loop side of things, will be in charge of explaining how to not have these production environments to begin with by creating smarter and better processes for engineers inside the team. So instead of the normal kind of 50 minutes-ish of a panel that we do, we'll have a fireside chat of about 25 to 30 minutes with myself and with Barbara. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's going to be very, very interesting. By the way, for anybody who's watching and doesn't wanna can't stay for the full meeting, or maybe wants to get a recording link, once we're done with the panel, the recording will be available in 2 places. We'll email you a link to the live recording on YouTube, and inside the LinkedIn page there will also be a live link to the video, so you can watch it later on in time. And yeah, Barbara, I think we can just get ahead and start it. It looks like we've got quite a lot of people joining. It looks from my end, we have about 60, 63, 64 people in the room currently, which is very, very exciting. Always fun to have a lot of people there. And yeah, super excited to have you on board, Barbara. Tell us a little bit about, oh, you know what? Let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before I forget, because I always do forget. And I want to make sure that we're good on that. On the bottom of the Zoom invite, if you're in the Zoom, there's a little Q&A button. If you click on it, you can ask questions. And then at the end of the fireside chat, Barbara can kind of answer them if you have anything concrete you want to ask and it's not included in the questions. And in addition, if you are on LinkedIn and not on Zoom, there is a little comments feature there where you can ask a question. You can just write your question as a comment, and I'll make sure to forward it to Barbara. I see both the Q&A and the comments, and that should be okay. So again, we'll keep this relatively short. I think it's 5 after the hour. We'll do about 25, 30 minutes of a chat, go through a few things. If you want to stay a bit more, I hope you folks would like to stay with us a bit more too. Yeah, let's get this show started. So Barbara, tell us a little bit about who you are, what do you do for a living, what do you do over at Meta, and a little bit about your background. That would be awesome for the audience to know.
Yeah, let's do a quick tour down memory lane. So, hi, my name is Barbara Mbanefo. I am from Nigeria in West Africa. I grew up there. I went to college in France, was there for 5 years of college, and then 5 years working at places like Motorola and Siemens Video, working on the back end, working on back end development. And over time, I wanted to travel the world a little bit. And so I heard Canadians were nice. And so I moved to Canada, and true to form, they're lovely people. And I worked there for a little bit. And slowly started working more towards the front end. So everything that had to do with web technology, CSS, that kind of thing. And very, very slowly, the company I was working for got acquired by a company in Hollywood. So I found myself living in sunny Los Angeles for a little bit, where I started working on user experience engineering. So my team was the first team at the company to actually focus on providing a good user experience to the end user, because we wanted to make sure that people had an an optimal flow through our mobile applications. We started with a team that had no training in UX, and within 2 years of me leading the team and supporting the team, we found ourselves with 6 international design awards for our user experience in our applications.
Was that 6 international awards? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. It was important for us to create structure so that the team knew what was expected of them. They got the training that they needed, and the partners that we were working with understood what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve, and it all worked out pretty well. And that's how Meta found me. It was called Facebook at the time. And there I worked as an iOS engineer for about 3.5 years, and moved on to manage the iOS developer experience team, because I cared very much about iOS development and wanted to be part of supporting the team that made it an optimal process for the thousands of engineers who build the iOS apps that billions of people use every day. After managing that team for about 2.5 years, I decided to try something new. So today I support the WWW developer experience team. So no longer mobile technology, but a vastly much larger developer base, and lots of very, very interesting customers that we work with who help us prevent problems in production or work with us to resolve problems in production as quickly as they arise. So that's the quick summary. It's nice to meet you.
Very cool, and thank you for that thorough summary. Just as a quick question, because I'm interested. So, how's the move from doing more, let's call it more product work, so more kind of on the customer facing side, so things that go out to customers on the outside, in the world, in comparison to working on things that are more, serving the internal organization that you work for? How's that changed from an engineering manager perspective?
Yeah. So when you're doing things that are customer facing, there is that sort of innate joy of saying, I built this UI and I can see somebody using it in real time. Or you go to
Right.
a party or your friends' homes and you can see them using Facebook, and you said, I built that button that you're using. And it's very exciting. It's also higher risk because it's higher risk because you're building something that is literally going out to billions of people every day. So you have to build it well. You have to build contingency measures for the case where something might go wrong. You have to be able to detect when those things happen and very rapidly move to fix them. So we have some very robust structures at the company to try and help us do that. Working in infra is a little bit different because our customers are the developers at the company. So the people inside of Facebook, or inside of Meta, as it's called today. And so the trade-off that we have here is that we can iterate quite fast. We have a multiplier effect on the applications that we build. Because if we do our jobs right, people can build applications much, much faster, and they can release new features and new fixes to production much faster than before. The trade-off or the difference that I notice is that our customers are in-house. So if something goes wrong, they tell us immediately. We don't have to wait for it. They're next door. They will tell us that something is broken and they need our help fixing it, and we can move incredibly fast to fix it outside. The fan out of the problem is much smaller because it is us inside the house, inside the company, trying to make sure that people can move fast and move reliably.
Right. I always thought that doing internal work, and I've done both also, that it has a different type of satisfaction. So you mentioned that you go to like your friend's house and like you see the button on the app and you're, oh my, I built that. But to me personally, I was an SRE before I became involved in developer relations, and I always thought that like the privilege of watching a developer just kind of from above, like behind her shoulder or behind her shoulder, kind of look at the screen and say, oh man, they're using this thing that I built, has this unique sense of satisfaction to it. It's not. Yeah, it's like, it's not just about the core product that I've delivered. It's also about the personal experience, right? Because they're right there, shoulder to shoulder with me in the trenches, working on something together for the larger sake of the company. So it feels very satisfying. So I completely understand kind of the differentiation. But moving on to the actual kind of questions that we had prepared. The first one is, again, more about the inner loop. So how do you approach prioritizing and troubleshooting unreproducible bugs compared to more easily reproducible one? And I want to tie that back to the general theme. So a lot of the time when bugs come in, you get like a ticket or a comment or a statement or a video or something from someone telling you, hopefully a video would be amazing, telling you that something's not working. But you can't always reproduce it. Too many factors involved. So how do you go about managing this workload as an engineering manager?
It's quite complex, and it depends on what app you're working on, what stack you're working in. There are so many factors. So like, I want to take examples of issues that happen in production, for example. So if somebody releases something, for example, I used to work in ads. And if somebody builds a component that breaks in production, we will get alerts. People have to set up alerts based on the logging that we have that tell us something is quite broken and we need to fix it. And when you work in ads, these things have monetary consequences. So if this thing breaks, this company won't be able to create their ads that let them reach the thousands of people who are interested in what they need to work on. So we have levels of site events that we have to make sure are addressed as quickly as possible. We call them SEVs, basically. And so depending on the bracket of the dollar amount of the impact of the problem, we would have to move extremely fast. So we try to look at this, we prioritize first on the number of people affected by the issue and the severity of the issue. What is the impact? Are they unable to create ads? Or are they just unable to move to the next screen? Is the app freezing? Is it breaking? And some of these things are easily reproducible. Some of them are not. For the things that are easily reproducible, it's more of a, okay, sometimes you'll get a video. If you're lucky, you get a video. And other times it's more about a log that is somewhere inside in our internal tooling. And so we have to go into these logs and crash events and really go spelunking deep inside the error messages to try and understand what went wrong. And we also dedicate some time into making sure that in some cases, we can actually try to reproduce like errors happening in production easily using like our own internal like CLIs, making sure that we can rerun the test commands that were supposed to have caught this thing before it happened. We have to look at the different keys because sometimes we have things called gatekeepers, for example. So like you can think of them as kill switches for things that go wrong. And so we have to make sure that somebody is in the gatekeeper or not in the gatekeeper, or they're in this category of people who are exposed to this kind of event versus these people who never experience it. So it's hard, but the TLDR of this is like we try to prioritize issues that are unreproducible by the number of people who are affected, the kind of interaction that it blocks, and then we can use that to assess how quickly we need to address the issue. And this goes for internal issues as well. If somebody's unable to build, say, the iOS app, for example, it might just be their machine. Their machine might be out of date. It might just be something that is very localized to them. And so we ask them for the commands that triggered the problem in the first place, and then we try to walk through them ourselves. If it's one person, it's a very different category of problem versus 200 people who are, say, unable to land diffs. In which case, we have to prioritize that very quickly because more people are blocked. More people need to move forward very quickly.
Right. And in your world, in an organization like Meta, like 200 engineers is a lot for everyone, but it's still small scale in comparison to the larger ecosystem of Meta. And you're building the infra and this kind of the foundation is on top of which many tens of thousands of people work on every single day. And I think that this is why I said earlier that the differentiation between normal customers and like internal customers is different, because internal customers in other ways are closer. Like they're here with us inside the org, and the impact is phenomenal and immediate, which is, I think, is beautiful. But to be mindful of time, let's move a little bit on. Talking about difficult bugs, can you describe something particularly challenging, something that was unreproducible, that you did manage to solve? And what would be the steps that you need to kind of get there? And I think we talk about the prioritization side of things. This is more about once you're in it, like with the hands in the dirt, what you did in order to get out of it.
Yeah. So when I was an IC, for example, I built a customer facing UI that was supposed to work both on iOS and on Android. And so this was an internal framework to the company. It's not public facing. It was built in-house. And the whole concept of it is it's a server-side framework that allows you to build once and run everywhere on different mobile devices. And for reasons unknown to me at the time, everything seemed to work really great in Android and never in iOS. So if I went to a page, created an ad, came back to my newsfeed, instead of my newsfeed or the user's page refreshing to show that the ad was active and running, I would see that no ad was running. And internally, not a problem. Externally, if you're a business owner and you're trying to make sure you're reaching people and you can't actually get confirmation in the app that what you're doing is working, that's a big problem. So I was working internally on this. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I went spelunking into the code, deep into tech stacks I had never seen before, things I didn't write. But that's kind of the beauty of Meta. Like nothing is anybody else's problem. You have the freedom and the range to just go diving into any code that you can get your hands on and make it better. And so I went deep into code I had never seen before, and basically figured out that the problem was that the way that the listeners or the observers were set up in Android were extremely different from the way they were set up in iOS. And I had to go and make sure I talked to the teams owning this framework to flag this issue to them, because they were not aware of it. The iOS implementers of this particular framework had chosen a different way of propagating changes up to the UI compared to the Android users. And so that was only solved because basically I just rolled up my sleeves and like got my hands dirty and said, I must find the root cause of this. And so once we figured out what it was, then it was a little bit easier, because instead of just going to someone saying, it doesn't work, you can say, this doesn't work. This is exactly what I tried. This is exactly the line of code where I think this is going wrong. This is why I think this is broken. And I need you to fix this now. And that spawned like huge projects across multiple orgs, because a lot of people weren't aware of this very small problem because I was the only one who experienced it. And so sometimes it's even though it's just one person, the impact of what you are doing fans out to multiple people, which is why we try not to ignore user reports from only one person, because there might be other people experiencing it, and as owners of the tooling, you might not know. So we try to pay attention to everyone who reports a problem, even though we're prioritizing the problems that have larger fan out at the start.
I think this is kind of key. So the understanding that the speed in which you iterate on a problem is a direct consequence of the amount of information that you have, like from two angles. So first of all is how much the developer themselves is involved in the actual troubleshooting process, which is tricky because you don't always have the capacity to go in, but also the fact that you can go back and forth with the internal customer and then get and extract that information is super valuable. So in a way, and correct me if you're wrong, that was my experience again as an SRE, was like it's much more it's easier to debug internal problems than it is to debug external problems because of the speed in which you move, but the stakes are in a sense higher, because again, you're putting your literal name and face and everything in front instead of, like, you know, hiding behind the company shield. You're inside the garden. There's no shield out there. It's just you. It's just you and the data team, you know, working on something. That's just my
Yeah, there's no force field. It's you and me and the problem. We got to go. We got to solve it. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, so moving on. I think that speaking of kind of working with other teams in the organization, how do you find that collaborating between different teams inside the organization help in solving these type of unreproducible bugs? And I like your examples of, you know, when you were in IC and how that kind of flooded up to a different department, or rather how your direct you know, shipping of a feature impacted eventually kind of the customer facing stuff. So I think what I'm asking is, how does that collaboration between you and the other team inside the org really help in resolving these bugs? And again, be specific on, if you can, on what actually helps. As in, what type of communication helps, what type of tooling helps, how does the problems get solved by communicating with those other internal teams?
Yeah. So one of the things I learned about working in developer experience is like solving the bug starts to happen long before you actually notice the bug. You have to create those relationships and those partnerships very, very early, so that the day that you need them, they are there. So I work in developer experience. So we are at the center of a hub of multiple infra teams across the company that talk to multiple product teams across the company. So we have a multiplier effect when we do our jobs, right? And so collaboration and partnership is crucial to our operations. It is the reason why, like, Instagram is able to ship the features that they have. Same thing with Messenger, same thing with the Facebook app itself. And so I personally carve out time to talk to my closest infra partners, to key representatives in the product orgs, to all of these different people, because I need to understand what problems they have, what goals they have, whether our goals are in alignment, and whether we can take a shared goal together to build something that is stable, which kind of preempts the problem in the first place. If we are building towards the same goal, then we don't have to worry about things going too wrong, because we know we're trying to achieve the same thing and we're working in tandem and communicating with each other. So to like give an example, like we're working, the Hack language is a programming language that is created by Meta, maintained by Meta. It's all internal, but it's a public facing language. Like, it's an open source language. It's a dialect of PHP.
Is that yeah, exactly. So I was wondering, because I know Facebook was originally written over PHP, and then they came up with an internal way to optimize the language even further. And I always found because PHP has an interesting reputation. Like, it depends on who you ask, but Meta has built an entire. I was very cautious when I said that. I was very kind of non-direct, but there is a certain reputation, and I think as somebody who grew up writing PHP, I love the language, that the magic that Meta did with it is quite amazing. You took it to completely different heights. I think this is, I'd assume that Meta is the largest organization in the world, like the largest PHP wielding organization in the world at the moment. I'd assume that would probably be right? Roughly.
I don't know. I don't have the statistics, but I do know that
Okay,
we do use Hack extensively, and we have entire orgs dedicated to making it one of the most performant server-side languages in the world. And so everything they do is to make sure that in production, this thing is firing on all cylinders, because again, we have 2 billion users a day. So we have to make sure that when people are trying to access their databases or the data centers or their photos or anything, this language is able to deliver as quickly as superhumanly possible, I would say. So it's actually very impressive what they've done with the language. I too loved PHP when I started coding. I thought it was lovely. It's a great way for people to learn to program, and Hack has just taken it to a whole new level. And we're close partners with them. And so we try to make sure we're taking goals to make sure that we are also contributing to optimizing the developer experience.
Amazing. And I always envied, companies who work on a specific language and kind of, how do you say, nurture it in-house and then, take it to different heights. I feel as if being kind of, and obviously in Meta and in a large organization, you'll eventually run into other languages in the fold, right? But if you focus on one language, there is a privilege of, having open source contributors kind of come to the company because of the language and maintaining a bunch of different interesting stuff around the language, frameworks, infra and such. That's lovely. Moving on. Speaking of technologies and problematic things that happen with production issues, what tools and technologies, and again, be specific as possible, what stack do you think are particularly helpful when troubleshooting and resolving difficult bugs in production?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that we use are not, unfortunately, not very public facing tools, because again, we've had to customize quite a bit of our development workflow to make sure that we can keep up with the scale of usage. But I mentioned some of these things earlier, like gatekeepers and sidebars and kill switches and things like that, that those are things that we have built internally to enable us to turn things off if they're going quite wrong, move quickly so that people are not impacted. We've set up internal alerting systems and escalation systems that make sure that we don't have to constantly be looking at charts and graphs to figure out if something is going wrong. The system will tell us if something is wrong so that we have these procedures in place to go and fix it. And so we go and create these SEVs, site events, or UBNs, things we call unbreak now. These are specific kinds of tasks that alert the people who are supposed to be the owners of fixing these things that they need to drop everything and fix this issue now.
So that I think is really interesting, and that speaks more to a production mindset, I assume, of the company. So which is not something trivial. A lot of like developers who are younger, who haven't seen a lot of like difficult things happening in production, just assume that this was always the case. So people were always minded about the production side of things. This is not true at all. There was a time in the past where you had your sysadmins who did the right side of the SDLC type stuff, and you had developers just writing code. There were the days, but nowadays it's really, I think, it's really mixed together. And by allowing, again, generally speaking, by allowing developers to be closer to the actual running production software is a better thing for the entire practice, for the entire industry. I assume it's a good shift of like a good mind shift, sorry, to be more minded towards production and less just about writing code, which I think is awesome. But I want to mention, and I'm a bit biased, obviously, I do work for a company that produces observability technology, but one of the things that kind of brought me closer to the production, again, when I was an SRE, was the fact that immediate information for developers coming in from production is really valuable. And being able to touch, quote unquote, the application without actually causing any damage, to again, play around with it, battle test it, kick it around to understand what's going on with real live traffic, be it via shadowing, dynamic instrumentation, or whatever, really, really makes a difference. So it's something that you have a whole set of things, basically, that enables you to do this kind of, let's call it, very gradual, very careful, very cautious touching of the production application in order to understand what's going on. So that's lovely.
We try to be very careful. For many years, one of our biggest developer mottos was move fast and break things. And now we're trying to move fast, but build reliable infra so that we're not breaking things too often. So this is important to us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that as companies grow and scale, and I like the reason why I like these panels, this fireside chat now, but generally these panels, is because I get to talk to people afterwards, and they tell me that they watched one of these sessions when they were kind of in a migration process or in a scaling process or like doing something large in their company, and they got a sense of how it looks like for the big guys, like for the really huge companies doing major work, and it's exactly the same at a larger scale. So basically, everybody's experiencing the same issues. They shouldn't feel bad about having like issues. Everybody has issues. Everyone.
Yes,
It's fine.
yes,
It's
yes.
only a matter of the quality of the systems that you build. Moving on. Speaking of communication, how do you communicate with the stakeholders, the people who are in charge of you and in charge of different platforms in the company and your internal customers, essentially, when an unreproducible bug impacts them, and what
Mhm.
strategies have been most effective for managing their expectations? And I do want to mention one quick thing. Barbara actually works in the team with Ryan, who was here previously in one of our sessions. So for the viewers who have been a long time viewers, and I'm looking at the list and I'm identifying at least 8, 10, 12, at least 12 of those names are people who I've seen before in our webinars. You might recognize the name Ryan Menezes, who again worked in Barbara's organization. So it's always fun to get people who work in the same org to share their tales from different angles, right? So I'll ask the question again because I went on a tangent here. How do you communicate with stakeholders and internal customers when a non-reproducible bug impacts them, and what strategies have been most effective for managing their expectations?
Yeah. So when an unreproducible bug affects a stakeholder, one of the very first things we do is reach out to their on-call. So lots of teams have on-call rotations, which are a group of people who weekly just rotate through making sure that their tools are okay, or there's somebody on hand to fix an issue if needed. And so we would reach out to their on-calls, whether it's through like a message. At Facebook, people have probably heard of this, but we have an app called Workplace, which is practically the same thing as the Facebook the whole world uses, but specifically for work. And so you're able to contact anybody in the entire organization within seconds if you need to find them. And so we're able to locate the on-calls of these tools and let them know that something has gone wrong and we need them to intervene as quickly as possible. We also create, again, SEVs, which are side events. And so we have a shared expectation across the company. If something is a SEV, it is a severe issue and it needs to be addressed very quickly. And so the culture that is set also helps us move fast and set expectations with people that, yes, we have realized that this is a really big problem and we're about to go in and fix it. Communication on those SEVs is absolutely transparent because it's important for everybody involved to be able to see the details of what the problem is and what mitigations are in place or what discussions are being had in order to address it. We also have a system of internal alerts, pop-ups, and things like that to make sure that if you're going to a certain surface that you expect to work and it's broken, there will be a notice on that page telling you, like, there is an ongoing issue, it is being resolved, please go here for more details. And then finally, as a manager, it is my role to also reach out to the managers of those calls or of those on-calls or those teams, depending on how severe the issue is, to let them know that there is a problem so that they can take the appropriate measures with their leadership, if needed, to follow up on it. And finally, after all of the issues are resolved, because that's what we do, we resolve these issues. A few weeks after that, we try to have a retrospective around the issue in question. For the very severe ones, we have regular recurring meetings where we all sit down and we say what happened, we review the tapes, or rather not tapes, we review the analysis and the solutions, and we try to ask ourselves, what can we do to make sure this never happens again? And we create tasks and assign them to people, and the expectation is that they do complete those tasks so that our systems can be more robust.
That's beautiful, and I think that those retrospectives. I like the watching the tape stuff, like a football analogy or whatever. I like the fact. No, I do like that because one of the things that I personally loved about retrospectives was the immediate aha moment you get. Oh, so that's what happened. Now we understand because in the moment you're in it, you're in the trenches, you're working out the kinks. and it's really, really difficult to raise, how do you say, raise above the let's call it the field, and get a larger look about what's going on, especially if you document and you kind of walk through the things. We joked about videos before, but one of my core kind of wants and like dreams as an SRE was having videos of things, but we do get close to it today with, you know, recording and like, you know, session recording and stuff like that. There are ways to go around it. But again, I'm going on a tangent, moving back into the discussion. Speaking of kind of doing this at scale, what kind of metrics and KPIs do you use within your organization to measure the effectiveness of troubleshooting defects? And I want to give some examples. So there's like time to resolve, so like a measure of time. There's defects by severity, the severity of each defect. There's usability versus functionality defects. There's broken builds. Basically, there's a bunch of different things you can check. Each of them is a figure, right? It's a number. But how do you know which one of them matters? And also, which one of them do you stick to make sure that the general quality of the process improves over time? So how do you go about that?
Right. So like there are hundreds and hundreds of teams here, all maintaining different things. And most of these teams, or rather all of them rather, have top line metrics that they have to pay attention to. And so if a tool is correctly set up, it has top line metrics, and it also has alerts that tell you when things go wrong. So these alerts will actually show you the graph of something spiking. For example, if a build, if for whatever reason iOS builds start to take 30 times longer than they used to, you will see a spike in the graph telling you that something has gone wrong and it needs to be fixed. And so we use that same metric that's telling us that something is going wrong to also demonstrate that it's now going right once the fix has been applied. And this kind of information is recorded in these SEVs to make sure that everybody can see that, yes, there was a problem and now it's better. So time resolved is kind of a proxy metric in this situation, because if there is a SEV, it has to be resolved as quickly as possible. So we don't really need to track it, because the expectation is it's solved almost immediately if it can be. But we do try to track developer happiness through developer surveys, micro surveys. So the developer surveys are like the big sprawling surveys that we ask the entire developer cohort at the company. But we can have more targeted surveys towards very specific people, like people who use a specific tool. And we want to understand very, very particular questions about what they enjoy about using it and what is not working, so that we can go and address it. And finally, we use Workplace, which is our internal Facebook tool, and we are able to track user happiness in certain ways. Like if somebody posts about something and we fix it, we can get people commenting on the post going, oh, thank you so much. That just makes everything better. And sometimes you get a lot of likes on a post, which is very gratifying for a lot of developer experience engineers, because they love helping people and they want to see that people are feeling better once their issues are addressed.
Okay, that's excellent, and I think that you spoke about, again, doing this at scale with hundreds and hundreds of teams. I think that maybe the core truth here is the fact that there is no right metric, right? There is no one metric to rule them all. It's more about figuring out what works best for your organization, and then making sure what you can do in order to improve that once you figure that out. Mm-hmm. I think that would be a core premise here. Okay, I think we'll do one last question, Barbara, and then once that's done, I think we'll let everyone get back to the day. So generally speaking, again, you work in developer productivity, you work in internal infrastructure, you work inside this world of making sure developers have the best time when working inside of Meta. What are your future goals around developer productivity? And let's focus specifically on defect mitigation. You know, we talked about troubleshooting. So what would be your own kind of set of goals for making this process easier?
Yeah. So if you've been following the news and stuff, you'll have seen our CEO talk about this being the year of efficiency. So for Meta, basically, the year of efficiency is a lot about making sure that developer efficiency is higher. We're trying to improve developer productivity as quickly and as sustainably as possible. So part of that is understanding what is slowing developers down. Sure, we have surveys, sure, we have a lot of things, but we're actually trying to build a lot more metrics to make sure that we are tracking their effectiveness a little bit better. and trying to partner with the right teams to make sure that we're moving these metrics. So for me, one of my goals is to make sure that some of these metrics exist, and that they're properly tracked, they're properly categorized, and they are properly aligned with the right alerts and tooling, so that we can get insights as quickly as possible into what we can do, or what singular leverage points we have to boost productivity from a single standpoint. So I really want to get great clarity into what is slowing engineers down, even greater clarity into what's slowing engineers down, so we can make them move faster. So that's kind of my goal for now. There will be different ones next year, so tune in.
That's how the game goes, basically. Each year you fix a problem, then each year there's 10 more that you gotta you gotta do. But like I think that's the beauty about software engineering. When you work as a developer, there's one guarantee alone. Every single day there will be more problems. Nothing ever gets right. It just works. Ever. There's always more stuff. But again, I don't know. I always felt developers really are riddle solvers. You know, we take the game very seriously, and we like the puzzle. That's where you do it. Otherwise, it would be pretty boring, I guess. Just
I love
working
that
on
you
it.
use the word puzzle. Like, that's kind of how I think of my job too. I love solving these puzzles. You know, that moment where everything comes together and you just go, yes, it's great. I live for those moments. Yeah.
Exactly, and then everything, like the final piece kind of the jigsaw clicks in, and then you've got it covered. Yeah, for sure. I want to do a little bit of a plug before we finish this discussion. You probably look at Barbara's screen and you can see the playground.lightroom.com on the left-hand side there. There's also a little bit of a link here, lightroom.com/logging. Lightroom, the company I work for and whose webinars we're currently in, builds a real-time developer instrumentation platform, a real-time dynamic instrumentation platform. We add logs, metrics, and snapshots at runtime in a read-only and immediate manner. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I do want to mention that if you have a lot of issues and troubleshooting production problems and have a problem with unreproducible bugs, Lightroom was built exactly for you. It's an amazing piece of tooling, which I can only have dreamed of when I was in SRE. Again, I'm obviously biased, but I joined the company with bright eyes, ready to work on tech that really changes the game, and I'm glad to say that I have been. And again, there's a free trial on the website, lightroom.com. There's a playground.lightroom.com. Feel free to play around with it. Barbara, anything you want to add before we close the session?
No, I mean, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy to talk about developer experience and all the things that go into it. So thank you.
All good. So I want to say again, thank you so much for joining us, Barbara. And for everyone who has watched this and is wondering where the recording will be, you will also be able to watch this exact video on LinkedIn. Just go to the event page. It will be live there about 15 to 20 minutes once we're done. And also we'll send over the recording via YouTube. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Barbara. And I wish we will do this again, and you will come again and share some more interesting things next year when the new game begins. So that would be awesome. Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.